Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Engineers Without Borders Philippines webinar series. This would be our first webinar. So before we start, I'd like to inform first for everyone because there's a lot of questions about the certificates. So certificates will be given to those who would fill up the feedback form. So the feedback form link will be shown to you after the webinar. Okay, so before we start, let me call on Martel from Engineers Without Borders UPD student chapter to discuss the guidelines during the webinar.
Okay, so before we start with the program, good evening everyone. Let me remind the participants that a link to the presentations used for this webinar is sent to the chat window so that you have a copy to follow along with your as the presentation progress. So here is the link. I'm sending it now. There will also be a 20 minutes open forum after the presentations of our speakers. Kindly reserve your questions then, and if applicable, note if the questions pertain to any section of the speaker's presentation for easy reference. There is a question and answer tab in your Zoom window. I will select and read the questions submitted, as many as our schedule permits. For those interested to ask their questions live, kindly chat me privately so that I can promote you as a panelist. Just a final reminder to identify to whom you're asking your question and to keep your questions direct and within the topics discussed. Without further ado, let me introduce the advisor for EWB-Philippines and current member of the EWB USA under Central Houston Professionals Chapter, Ms. Agnes Work, for the welcoming remarks. Hello, Ma'am Agnes, you're on po.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Engineers Without Borders Philippines webinar series number 1. My name is Agnes Wark. I am a member of the Engineers Without Borders USA Central Houston Professional Chapter, and currently I'm the project lead for the Philippines project, and also the advisor to the Engineers Without Borders Philippines team. This webinar series number 1 is brought to you by Engineers Without Borders International, Engineers Without Borders USA, and Engineers Without Borders Philippines. Also in partnership with the Philippine Technological Council, Young Engineers Section, Experto, and Ingeniero.org. Today's webinar, we will be talking about transcending borders. What does it mean to an engineer from the developing world? By Dr. Harold Aquino. And there's another topic called Sustainable Project Practices, what works and what doesn't, brought to you by Mr. Mark Illian. I hope that you will be enjoying and learning today's webinar series number 1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, sorry. For our first speaker is Dr. Diocel Harold Aquino. He is currently an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and he just finished his PhD in civil engineering at the University of Auckland, New Zealand, and took his bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering at UP Diliman. He was a member of Engineers Without Borders New Zealand, and now he is one of the newest member of Engineers Without Borders Philippines. So for the first topic, so please welcome Dr. Diocel Harold Aquino.
Hi, good evening, everyone, to those who are in this, and good day to those in the world. And wherever part we're in right now, I hope you're healthy and well. So, like the introduction, the introduction said, I'm Harold. I'm part of the Engineers Without Borders in in the Philippines, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Illian. I like to call myself a humanitarian and resilience engineer. So this is what I do. I mostly respond to disaster-stricken areas and do projects with communities to help them build resilience. To start my presentation, let me tell you that I want to be as honest as possible, and let me start with sharing to you my first impression of Engineers Without Borders. The first time I heard about EWB, I thought it was an excellent idea, but only if you're an engineer from the first world. An engineer from a country where there's plenty of engineers, an abundance of expertise, and there's plenty of talent or expertise to share to a world in need. I was part of EWB during my PhD stint at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And yes, we had projects within that country, within New Zealand. Projects involving helping less fortunate people in South Auckland, aiding or providing technical assistance in the recovery of Christchurch. But living to the name Engineers Without Borders, we had projects in other South Pacific Island nations. We had projects improving sanitation systems in Vanuatu. We also had another project providing clean water in Tonga, and we also had one. We also had one in the electrification of a village in Samoa. Just to sum it up, we had a good number of overseas initiatives. I've recently returned to the Philippines and joined the local chapter here. But, you know, at the back of my mind, there was this one lingering question. What does it mean to be an engineer without border in the developing world? How do you become an engineer without border when the passport you hold isn't really powerful enough to actually roam the world? Or importantly, in this time of pandemic, where travel is very much restricted, how does one live up to the name engineer without border? On another view, does it mean anything to transcend borders when you only need to open your windows to see poverty, hunger, and dire need, and you see them every day, when year in and year out, hundreds or even thousands of people lose their homes, their loved ones, and their livelihoods to disaster in your country? My journey with EWB and as a humanitarian engineer in general taught me that there are a lot of borders that we have to cross or disregard altogether in order to become a true engineer for the world. And that's what we'll talk about today, what these borders are and how we are to transcend them. Sorry, I forgot to press my slides. I hope you're seeing the correct slide now. I know I'm speaking to a lot of engineering students today, and I believe the first border that we have to cross are the walls of the classroom. This is also known as a wait until I finish my studies or wait until I get my license border. I know that this may be too abstract, but it also applies to the borders of the virtual classrooms that you have at the moment. I know that a typical engineering student think you already have a lot on your plate. Swamped with books to read, standards to familiarize yourselves with, and problems to solve. And for those who recently graduated, congratulations, but there's probably a lot of reviewers, a pile of them right in front of you to study, to prepare for the board exam. But let me tell you this, there's a lot more that you can learn when you go out to the real world than what you can read in books. Don't get me wrong, it's important to learn the fundamentals from the books, but these book learnings are reinforced better in the planning and actual execution than in typical academic activities. In fact, in the hierarchy of learning, actual practice contributes more to the learning than the typical academic activities. From experience, actually, let me share to you the first time I truly knew how to make a footbridge. And it wasn't the time that I got a perfect score in the structural engineering part of the licensure exam. It was actually when I helped the community build one. And so I was a graduate for a few years, and I was asked by an NGO to help in their project with the community in Isapolo in Navotas City, Metro Manila. The community was difficult to access. For you to get there, you have to walk for half a kilometer over pilapil. In English, it's earthen dikes separating fish ponds. You can imagine during the rainy season, these dikes become submerged, making it difficult for people to go in and out of the community. In fact, the students would tell me they would have to bring their uniforms with them in a plastic bag so that they can change into them after or when they reach the other end. In during the typhoon season, it's close to impossible crossing these pilapils, and so there's really a need to get them to cross safely to the mainland. I was asked to help them build a half-meter. And I said yes, thinking that it was as easy as opening my college notes and browsing through the NSCP and simply following through. But you know, it couldn't be farther from the truth. I realized I couldn't build the trust bridge that we see in the books because we didn't have the resources for that. And even if we did, it'll take too long and would need a lot of expertise and equipment to implement. And so we had to make do with what the community had at that time: bamboo poles and wood planks. We also had to improvise by using concrete-filled paint cans for the support footings. And that's the bridge that you see in the slide right now. So that's the footbridge that is now being used by members of that community to cross to the mainland. Not all classrooms have four walls. And this is the first challenge I'll tell you today. Make the world your classroom. If you want to learn how to build a house, you learn it better by helping someone rebuild the house they lost to a recent typhoon or an earthquake. Now, on to the second border. So the second border that we have to transcend are the preconceived notions of an engineer. And these notions are either ingrained to us in our minds or are reinforced by other people's expectations of us. When I was in the 5th grade, I dreamt of making a spacecraft that could go the farthest from the Earth. And also at one point, I dreamt of designing the tallest building in the world. But if I may bring you back to what engineering is about, it is application of scientific and mathematical principles to practical ends and to address needs and solve problems. So that's what engineering is about. It's about solving problems. It's about addressing need. And last I checked, there are more pressing problems in the world than the lack of skyscrapers, or that we can do better in the specs of the latest gadgets and vehicles. I have nothing against those working towards these things, but we should also remember that 21,000 people die of hunger and malnutrition every day. That's close to 8 million dying of hunger every year. That 2.3 million people lose their homes to disasters every year. That 10% or 780 million of people do not have access to clean water, and that almost a third of the world's population, that amounts to about 2.4 billion people, do not have access to proper sanitation. Remember that we can do something about it. And guess what? One of the things that you can consider is working in the development sector, is going full-time on this. But let me tell you that it's actually not a dichotomous decision of whether you would go work in the industry or take on these global challenges. In fact, I know a lot of people working in the industry and doing and making an effort on these things at the same time. The other speakers or the other panelists that we have now, I know they're working both in the corporate setting and also doing engineering stuff that will help alleviate these problems. In fact, the industry partners of EWB New Zealand also allocate pro bono engineering hours for our initiatives. So no, you don't have to choose one over the other. You can go work if you think you're cut out for the industry. You can still devote time in these initiatives, but you can also consider getting into the development sector. Now, the third border that we have to cross is the border of our comfort zones. Truth be told, the work of taking on these global challenges may not be as comfortable as sitting in an office from 8 until 5, or maybe run a construction project, or monitoring a manufacturing plant, or teaching a class. I know from experience, I'm able to compare them. It may be thankless at times, and a lot of friends in the development sector would always say that you should be prepared to jump from one job to the other. That's job security, nothing compared to that in the corporate world. And it can clearly go beyond one's comfort zone. I remember spending most of my Christmas break of 2011 in this evacuation center. This was the evacuation center after Typhoon Sendong in Illian City. So a lot of them lost their homes to a flash flood. Some of them lost their loved ones. And I was sure that there with adequate basic services. Two of my good friends have been living with the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar moment, and they've been there for months now. One of them, Marina, helps prevent landslides in the area. You can see that it's very landslide susceptible because of the rain. And the other one, Shahab, is working towards providing proper infrastructural services to the people. So that's how many months they have been working away from home, away from their families. But you know, it's also well spent. And yes, it will cross your mind to ask why you're doing what you're doing. And in my case, I just need to look at the people's thankful faces. And that's enough to wipe away my tiredness and doubt. And it always gets me going. And having talked about these borders, I'd like to start wrapping up to say that these borders are only as relevant as you make them to be. You decide whether academics would hinder you from taking on a real world challenge. You decide whether you want to remain in the box of a stereotypical engineer. You choose whether or not to step out of your comfort zone and make this world a better place. Are you ready to step up and be part of the movement towards sustainable global development? Because that's what EWB is about. It's about not letting the borders that we have identified hinder you from using your engineering skills to benefit humanity and the environment. Let me also tell you that there is no need to cross international borders for you to be a true engineer for the world or an engineer without border. But who knows where your path may take you, right? Mine started in the Philippines, brought me to a lot of different countries, brought me to New Zealand and then to Fiji, and now I'm back in the Philippines. Where next? I don't know either. Finally, I'd like to say that EWB, or being a global engineer, is about taking on the global challenges, starting with what you see every day, right in front of you. Is it pollution? Is it unsustainable practices? Is it poverty and hunger? Is it resilient housing? You think you use your skills to alleviate any of it? Take it on, start with it. And that's what a global engineer is truly about. And that's what transcending borders is truly about. That concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. From the Q&A box, we're having a lot of comments about the audio. So this is actually being recorded. So maybe afterwards you can check the recorded link via Facebook Live. I think it would be the audio there would be better. Maybe it's a streaming problem also. So for our second wait. For our second speaker, we have Engineer Mark Illian. He is a husband, father, engineer, and founder of the nonprofit Nature Healing Nature, with a vision of eliminating water-related illness on Earth, utilizing skills and materials that are already available to those in need. He is an electrical engineering graduate of Texas A&M University, and Mark has been partnering with EWB as a project lead, health safety officer, and travel mentor since 2013 on a variety of WASH-related projects in Peru, Kenya, and South Africa. So please welcome Mr. Mark Illian.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Emin and Martel, for putting us all together and bringing us together today. I hope all of you out there are well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Looks like we've got people from all over the world. I'm going to share a slide presentation with you, and you have access to it now. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about how to make your project sustainable. All of you are either involved in or are wanting to be involved in, you're already conducting projects or you're about to conduct projects. So I would like to talk to you a little bit about the non-technical side of your project. I'm not going to read all these slides to you. That's why you have copies of them that you've got access to. You can go back to them at any time, use them as a laundry list, for example, of what you might want to consider in your projects. And you'll find a few things in this presentation that are in yellow, and those aren't on your slides, but they're to remind me to talk about those topics because it's a topic very, very, very close to my heart. And as we go through this, I want you to be thinking about the second part of your project, which is the behavioral change that needs to be instilled. So I'm with the EWB Central Houston Professional Chapter. I've been doing WASH type projects since 2007. I've been associated with EWB since 2013. My wife and I started a nonprofit organization, Nature Healing Nature, and the idea was to show people how to clean their water, how to build latrines, make soap if they needed to, using only what they had on the ground that they had access to within about 1 kilometer of where they were living, no matter where we were in the world. And I thought it was going to be a technical issue. Being an electrical engineer, you know, that's my hammer. But it turned out it's actually very much a people issue. It's about behavioral change. All of my knowledge pretty much went out the window. It was basically needing to be with people, listen to those people, and co-create with them. So what is sustainability? Merriam-Webster says it's relating to or being a method of harvesting resources and doing it so that you don't deplete them or permanently damage them. That's fine. It also says that it's a lifestyle of sustainable methods. I have pretty much the same definition from a little bit different perspective. I believe that at least it's building and creating something helpful without depleting it, but at best, which is what is really nice to strive for in our project, it's building something that enhances the existence of everything around it. It actually encourages life, all kinds of life. Obviously, we're probably going to have to deplete a few things, but not permanently when we go in. We might have to move things out of the way. And there's a process to follow. A volunteer village is going to be your friend or nemesis throughout the entire project. You've got to go through the process, and sustainability is every part, every step. Keep that in your mind. What are we doing to make sure it lasts? What are we doing to make sure that people take ownership? you're going to need to be a very strong chapter. You're going to need to have the staff to get the job done. I'm working with some universities, and the most difficult part is getting enough people to show up to the meetings because they're so busy, and it's very difficult to get something done that way. You wind up leaning on just a few leaders, which gets pretty exhausting. So make sure you've got plenty of staff. If you don't, take the time to go and get them. Can you do it safely? What's the social infrastructure that you're going to need to deal with? All these things are going to come out while you're doing your projects. You also are going to need some partnerships. Well, your first partnership is with that village. You must develop trust. You must listen to what they need and not tell them what they need. Always, and please understand this, no matter what culture you're in, please ask if the women can be involved. I've been in social settings to where everybody told me before I went, you know, the women do this is the culture, this is the caste system, whatever you want to call it. But in the end, most of the time when I sat down and I said, do you mind if we involve the women in this meeting? Can we go get some women to be a part of it? And in every case, they said, yes, we can do that. They looked odd, but they did it. There's a big difference between what you see in cultures in large cities and what you see in cultures in very small, remote locations throughout the world. So where do you start? I suggest you don't arrive and start doing something. I really suggest you arrive, take some time for yourself, and not do anything. Smell it. Where are you? Look around. What's going on around you? Feel it, hear it. Observe. Yeah, there's going to be people saying, oh, I'm so glad you're here, and what do you want to do next, and all that kind of stuff. Just tell them you want to look around for a few minutes, see how they live, before you start a whole lot of talking and conversation. Now, this is very important. It took a lot of time for Monica and I to develop this. When we sit down with the people, the first things out of our mind isn't things like, well, tell us about your water, or tell us about your sanitation, or how y'all doing. Instead, our first is to tell them why we're there. And the purpose for our being there is to ask them how they live. That's it. How do you live? We're here to find out how you live. We'd also like to ask you some questions about what do you need in your world? And maybe we can help with that. Maybe we can't. Maybe we know a village nearby that's already solved that problem. Using only what they have, they did it all on their own. And if we hear that, we'll let you know what they did. Is that all right? Do you want to continue talking? And in every case, they're curious. You mean you're not here to do such and such? And we say, no, we're here to talk first. So start from a place of listening and having a conversation about their lives. Make sure you listen after that. Make sure they understand that whatever you come up with together to solve an eventual problem, you're going to be considering multiple solutions. Don't fall in love with the first solution, especially theirs or yours. Go out there and tell them, okay, we know that, we got that. Yeah, you all want a well. Now let's go find out how you can what's the problem? Why do you need a well? Okay, what's going on? I mean, you're not dead. You obviously don't need more water. So if you're not dead, what's the deal? Go from that perspective. Try to dig down to what it is you're trying to accomplish. And again, involve the women. Ask them. They usually know what's going on. And they typically will come from a place that's from their heart and from their emotions, from their creativity. Also, you're going to have to do some specific things like how many people are available, what's the weather like, when is their harvesting season. Don't show up when they're having to go out there and harvest their only source of food for the rest of the year. Do they have any skilled craftsmen? And I guarantee you they will. Even though they think they don't, they do. They've got people that know how to build things we've got no clue how to do. So you're also going to be learning during your projects. Please don't ever make a promise of any kind. Don't tell them, I will do this. When we go back, we're going to have a project for you. We're going to do this. Don't do that. They're hanging on every word. Tell them you're going to try to do that. See, when you make a promise and you break it, even if it's small, you chip away at trust. And this is about not building trust. You already have it. This is about losing it accidentally. Don't make promises. It's the first thing and the easiest way for you to be able to lose their trust. Always keep your word. If you tell them we'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, be there at 9 o'clock. Don't be there at 9:15. Also, don't tell them you're going to be there at 9 o'clock to begin with. Be more careful. We'll show up tomorrow morning, probably sometime around that. We'll do our best to be here then. Be very careful about being dogmatic in what you tell them. Remember, this is not so much about technology. It's about creating powerful feelings of self-worth within they're doing it themselves. You are creating a long-term behavioral change. When you get your NGOs involved, make sure that they can deliver the goods for you, make sure that they know what they're doing, make sure that they know how to handle logistics, because you're going to need that. And before you leave, get your water committee. Make sure they've got a committee formed. Ask them, do they have any kind of committee? Have they ever had a committee? What is their governance like? And then form that committee within what they're used to. It may be very bizarre to your way of governance. Use their technology and their techniques for doing it. And please get the women involved on that committee. If you can, do it. Remember, it's about behavioral change. Get the people involved. Before you leave, make sure they have the labor available. Make sure they contribute. You're not going to do this for them. Make sure they've got a way to collect funds to keep the projects maintained. Also, before you leave, go back and verify your trust. Ask them, have you heard me make any promises to you? And make them say, no, you've not made any promises to us. You want to hear that. How many promises have I made while I'm here? You want to make sure you're not walking away where they're hearing you doing something different than what you thought you were. Ask them things like, do you understand how long this is going to take? I'm not going to be here in 2 or 3 months. This is going to take a year, maybe 2. We don't know. We have no idea, but we'll keep you posted. And also make sure you've got a way to communicate with them. Sometimes that's pretty tough. Usually your NGO will be able to do that. You know, there's more telephones out there, I read, than there are toilets. But still, some of your villagers don't have access to power to keep them charged. Then go back home, do your job. Go to Volunteer Village, make sure you can navigate it well. Do some of the tutorials and get it done. You got a lot of paperwork to do. You got a lot of approvals to get through. Get your people together and go after it. So let me give you an example of what this might come together about. And I want you to pick out some of the things that Dr. Aquino was talking about. Don't go in with preconceived notions. And remember that you're not solving a problem when you walk in all of a sudden, you're solving a need. And so don't go in there with that technology of problem solving. Go in there with the idea of how are we going to solve this need and make sure they can maintain it forever. So I'm going through this quickly. Go back over the slides that you've seen. It's a laundry list of some ideas, but when you're looking at it, go through the thinking of how am I going to establish a behavioral change when I do it? So to get to Iquitos, which is one of the examples I'm giving you, and the small town of Payarote, it's a small village, it takes 3 days to get there. Not uncommon on some of these projects. We got to fly, got to spend the night, got to fly again, take a bus ride for 2 hours to the river, and then get on a boat. There's no access to these villages except by boat. There's no railroads, there's no paths, there's nothing. They're in the middle of a forest, pretty thick forest, all of these places. We're talking about, in this case, 48 households, 250 people, okay? By the way, you get over about 500 people, you're gonna have a lot of different social things to take care of compared to a small village. When we got there, this is a Petri dish full of E. coli, all those little dots, that's E. coli, and you have to multiply all that times 20. So this little stream right here has got about 6,000 E. coli in it per 100 milliliters. Obviously they're getting sick. And this is what they drink. Actually, this is the river water. Excuse me. This is the creek water. But a little bit further upstream, it's a little bit better, but it's still about 600 E. coli per 100 milliliters. So that's what we were trying to do, is this bottom picture, give them clean water, after we talked to them and asked them what they wanted. This particular village, it's underwater for months during the year, so it's kind of a challenging, and that's what the building was looking like when we got there, what we had to work with. Went back, decided let's do this without using any fuel or electricity, because they don't have any electricity. We want to use gravity, materials that are locally available, etc. So we did our, we did our thing. We went back home after we talked to them for a long time, and we did our designs. We had our meetings. We did our structural analysis. We did our beam sizes, material takeoff and costs. We went out and got money at the same time from Rotary. So we're doing all this in parallel, like all of you are familiar with doing, or are going to need to soon. And then we went out there and started building it. Now I'm going to go to the next slide, which is slightly different than what you're looking at here, because there's some things I want you to be thinking about while you're doing your building. And that's these. You don't have this slide. The more people that you get involved from the village, the more likely you're going to create ownership that is sustainable. So get the people involved. How do you do that? Well, one thing you do is right off the bat, you tell the people that are running the show, the leadership, that they are required to have somebody from every household work at least a day on your project. It's up to you to figure out what they're going to do. Even if you're building a road with a subcontractor, get them out there and do something, preferably more than one day. But you need to have every single household have a representative that puts some effort into the project. It's up to you to keep them safe. It's up to you to figure out what they're going to do, but you can figure that out when you get there for sure. Involve the men, of course, involve the women. No matter what the culture, try to get them involved. Even if it's behind the scenes, have them start doing some of the education, et cetera, which needs to go in parallel. But get the women involved. They're going to be one of the most powerful assets to making this work, especially after you leave. Have a list ready for filler work. What that means is stuff that we had on this project down there by the chicken. We had all kinds of dirt everywhere after digging the holes to put these posts in. A woman came up, she had a machete. That's about the only tool they've got. About 70 years old, about 4.5 feet tall. Okay, I'm here to work. I'm required to work. What do I do? Well, that's what we put her to work doing, was smoothing out all of that rubble underneath our construction site. Look how smooth she made it. Took her all day. Unbelievable. She worked hard as anybody else. And she had something to do, and she had something to contribute. And what she wound up with was absolutely beautiful. Get started training your foreman. Elect somebody, have the people elect somebody to be the foreman and show them how to run a project so that you don't do it. Let them do it. You get it together in the morning, you have your morning meeting, but then you turn it over to them. You're there to guide, not to do it. Extensive training in parallel to construction. Have some of your crews going out and doing education that supports your project. For example, hand washing, how to keep the water, in this case, clean, all the way to the household, all the way to their mouth. We could give them the cleanest water in the world. And if they contaminated it on the way home or while it was sitting at their house, it was a useless project. Listen, observe, you are going to learn. They're going to teach you all kinds of things. And one of those things is also not so technical. They're going to talk to you and teach you a lot about joy. That's different than at least the Western world where I live. Make sure you instill a long-term behavioral change. You can read through it. However, when you leave, make sure that water committee is strong. Have them go and practice collecting money while you're there so you can discuss some of the difficulties that they're having. Do things like that. Keep your mind open to the people issues more than just the nuts and bolts and nail issues. That's the fun part, but it's also the easy part, and it doesn't make it sustainable. People do. We co-created success. We got our clean Petri dish, and it's been that way for 4 years. Look how clean that storage water is. We took the project all the way to where they drank the water, not just where they collected it. We've done it in 3 villages now, over 4 years. And we energized the village. We know that we were successful because the villagers carried on after we left. Yes, we built this rainwater harvesting system with them, but after they left, they put on a new roof. Look at this building. Look at the difference. We weren't there. They did that all on their own, and they'd not worked like that before in a long time. They even painted it. These people were energized to do more for themselves. Somehow there was a stagnance, but after this project, they're still doing things around the entire village that seemed to be stagnant before that. Co-create with them, involve them, and realize that the most challenging part of every project is get the people involved permanently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Let me call on Martel. So we'll be starting our open forum. So if you have any questions, type it on.
Okay, so hello, good evening. We'll be starting our open forum. For those interested to still ask their questions live, kindly chat me privately so that I can promote you as a panelist. But for now, I will select from the roster of questions submitted through the question and answer tab. Okay, so first one, I have it for both speakers. Kindly decide on the both of you who will answer na lang first. Sustainable development delves with multi-sectoral problems through practical and applied applications. However, these problems seem to link up with local or regional policies that may hinder sustainable solutions. Do organizations need to proactively push for sustainable policies to enact these solutions? Do you need me to repeat it, Papa, or is it okay now?
Doctor, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, sorry about that. I think we should push it all fronts. So there are people who would do better in lobbying for better policies, and there are people who are better suited working with the people on the ground trying to solve the more immediate problems. So I say it's a two-pronged approach. Mark?
If you have time, if you have the ability to do it, absolutely. You're going to learn how to do that if you decide to do it with those NGO partners I was talking about. If you're cold turkey on the scene, never been to that country before, never been to that village before, you're probably not going to know what's going on politically, so you probably ought to stay out of it. However, if you're committed to be there for quite some time, go find out who are the movers and shakers, who are the lobbyists. When we were in Cambodia, we were in the middle of nowhere doing all kinds of work, but we took time off to go back to the capital of the country to what they call the Watsan meetings, which is the movers and shakers, you know, Plan International, UNICEF, World Health Organization, Asian American Bank, all of the ministries that had to do with water and sanitation were there. So we would take time to show them what our results were. For example, we told them our interpretation is that 95% of the water that's consumed in rural areas is dirty. They didn't want to hear that. So they went out and they funded a study. World Health Organization funded it. Guess what they found out? 95% of the water, by the time it got to people's mouths, was contaminated in rural settings. So yes, get involved. Take your knowledge to them that you learn, but just kind of be careful you know how to do it and make sure you're going to be around to be able to follow up.
Okay, that's very insightful, sir. Thank you, Sir Harold and Sir Mark. Okay, so for the next question, we have it for Sir Mark. What's your take in Kaizen or continuous improvement to incorporate it with sustainability? The concept of Kaizen.
Mark, do you want me to handle this one?
Yes, thank you, Terry.
I'm an industrial system engineering by training. I'm always looking for continuous improvement opportunities. As an organization, you're just putting in the initial infrastructure. They're not going to have everything they need when you leave. And so they have to be in a position not only to maintain it, but to build upon it. So what you hope to do is that you instill enough hope and willingness to undergo challenges and that in the community itself, that they will take your initial solution and build on it. And we've seen that happen in several instances, particularly in the Peru project. I believe that one community extended their piping for another water station. You saw the example of the community that made the improvements to their building, adding on a roof vent and a new roof with help from us on a design standpoint. But you know, the quick answer is you want to create an environment so that continuous improvement can take hold and go from there.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is a question from Fredel de Vera. How can a certain project be chartered, and how can you determine all possible stakeholders for a specific project? This is probably addressed to anyone, so anyone can answer.
Doctor, you want to take that? I'm happy to. I just wondered if you're never going to know all the stakeholders. You're just going to hope that you get to some powerful ones that can motivate the others around them. A lot of these projects are about involving the people that others look up to. Are they a stakeholder? I don't know. That's a big term. But when you walk into a village to do some of these projects, you already know 100% of that village is probably going to change. Something in their life is going to change. So they're all stakeholders. I'm not one that likes to do designs by committee. And so you're never going to touch all the stakeholders, just involve the ones that you can find. And it's a good question from a standpoint of be listening for who are those movers and shakers and pull them in, regardless of what their title is. One person here has a question to me of what qualifications and experience do I need to do this work? And I want to tell you, the fact that you could write that question, you've already got it. The fact that you're here right now, today, you've already got all the qualifications it takes. I believe there's not a whole lot of creativity in knowing. There's not a whole lot of creativity in already having the knowledge about something. Where the creativity comes in, which is co-solving, is you're being stuck in a situation you've never been stuck in before, and you're having to talk with some other people and create a solution given what's on the ground around you. Now that's creative. What did you have to know before you got here? Nobody can answer that because you don't know what you're going to have when you get there. So go, 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 go. You're already there. You've already got enough. You'll be amazed at what you can create with other people.
I'll take the first part of that question, which was on project chartering. And I'll tell you that the U.S. has basically a form that the community fills out that has a ton of questions associated with it that says, what are your problems? What are your priorities? What do you think your perceived solution is? And then, and then they submit that application to the organization. It's reviewed and judged whether it's worthy, and then it's put up to be adopted by certain project or by certain chapters that can undertake a project. I presume that the Philippines EWB organization will have some similar process, as I'm sure that the New Zealand organization had as well. But it usually starts with some sort of application by a community saying, I need help, or we need help. And we're willing to help the international organizations by putting them in contact with our national organization and saying they would like to get a full understanding of your process, including the chartering part of it.
So thank you for that, sir. And Sir Harold, yes?
I also want to comment on the latter part of the question about stakeholders. So I would just want to echo what Mark earlier said. What the first thing you do when you enter a community is to stand there and observe. And one of the things that you would actually observe are the power structures, who are the main decision makers in the community, and who would be good champions within the community to put forward these actions. From my experience going to these communities, particularly in Fiji, in the Philippines, we our villages or communities are very hierarchical, and we have village heads or village chiefs, and in the Philippines we have barangay captains, and these are the things that you probably would want to talk to first, and they're the ones who um, who might be able to identify who are the other prime movers within the communities are. But at the same time, we have to also remember that we shouldn't be the marginalized as well. So, like Mark also mentioned in his presentation earlier, do not leave the women away. In fact, in most of the projects that I did both in the Philippines and overseas, the women were more actually involved in the projects because they have plenty of time to devote to these projects. So they were more involved in the discussion. They were, even if they can't really carry the bamboo poles in the community in Navotas, they actually prepared food for us. They partook in the painting of the bridge. So just involve everyone who'd like to be involved. Involve everyone who you think would be good champions and would involve more people into the cause.
So thank you for those answers, our dear speakers. So there are a lot of talk about joining EWB and actually knowing the inner workings of what the organization does. So we will reserve all of those questions as well as how to get the e-certificate at the latter part of the forum, since we have at least around 7 minutes left. So for the next question, okay, so I have this from Janelle Christian Santos. How do you handle mistrust from the community? Do you still continue projects even if they don't trust you from your arrival or to after the talks? I suppose it's also addressed to anyone.
I believe the foundation of every community project with the community is mutual trust. And so, and also we'll be working on a project that originated from them, not a project that we want to impose on them, not a solution that we think would solve their problems. So it's a prerequisite. If the people don't trust you, you better learn it first before doing anything else.
My take on that is if you wind up in a situation of mistrust, something went wrong. And you've got probably half or more responsibility for that. When you showed up, they didn't know you from Adam. And if you and they have gone through a conversation to where they have mistrust, something got sideways during the conversation. I would go back and I would ask them, number one, I'm feeling like y'all don't trust us here. What happened? And then be quiet. You'd be amazed at how powerful silence is after a very clear question. And let them answer you. And if you don't understand the answer, ask them again until you do. If everything winds up being, they just don't trust you, they don't like the way you look, don't go there and don't give it a second thought. There's too many people in the world that need your help. Go someplace else. But before you do, make sure that it wasn't your fault that caused the mistrust.
Sir, so I guess we also have a follow-up question from Jessa Jane Sanchez. So how can you gain the trust of the community who don't trust your project specifically?
like I said, the project isn't really something that you post on the. It's a co-created project. It's a co-created solution to what the community see as their needs. So um, if the community doesn't trust your project, something must have gone wrong during the process. They might not have been very involved in the formulation or in the identification of the problem or the need, or they might not have been involved enough in the formulation of what we think would be the solution to that problem. So yeah, just the key is to foster genuine conversation, to foster genuine interaction with them. So that trust is built, and another key is for them to own the project. So yeah, for them to own the project.
So thank you for that, sir. So for our next question, it's very timely during our pandemic. For both speakers, what can we expect in the field of, for Sir Mark, water supply and sanitation, and for Sir Harold, flood control and management during the time of the COVID-19 crisis? I suppose this is specifically for the Philippines.
Or can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. What can we expect in terms of adjustments in the field of water supply and sanitation during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis? And this also goes for Sir Mark. Hello, Sir Mark.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't know enough about the Philippines to be able to answer that question very well. COVID viruses of all kinds have been around a long time. WASH is not only about water, not only about sanitation, it's also about hygiene. And as you can see throughout the entire world right now, we've got this gargantuan study of what does it mean to be more hygienic throughout the world, which includes wearing a mask. So of course it's going to change, but I'm not sure that I can tell you that there's an ABC item that's going to change as much as it's stuff that's already been there all along. Oh my gosh, every WASH person on earth has had hand washing as the #1 thing they're trying to get the people to do. COVID-19 is probably the biggest impetus that has ever come along in the history of the current world, to where the entire world is being told, go wash your hands. That's a message we've been trying to get along in a long time. So my answer, the short answer is, I don't think it's going to change much. All this COVID-19 and everything it's going to do with it is actually going to get people to probably listen more to the message that you're bringing.
Interesting, thank you. So for our next question, this comes from Emilio Paul Nagales. How can we get people involved for projects in an urban poor setting as opposed to a rural village setting? In general, urban poor communities seem to be less closely knit than small rural community villages, so it may be difficult to get them involved or interested. So what actions are needed to be taken there?
I'd love to take this on first. Monica and I find our biggest challenges are urban slums, no matter where they are. But the thing you have to work with is that every urban slum that we've ever been in still has a leadership going on. Whether it's formal or not, there's a leadership. Get with the leaders and start asking them what that slum needs and why, how it manifests itself. And then that's the first meeting is with that leadership. Go find those leaders, they're there. And then tell them, before that meeting ends, now we want to have a meeting with everybody, the entire slum. You're not going to get the whole slum there. We've been in slums with 30,000 people, but what you probably are going to get at that meeting are people that are leaders over there throughout the slum, and start talking to them. And what you'll wind up with, at least is what we wound up with, is the same dynamic as the village. It turns out that these slums are like a village unto themselves. They don't have as many materials to work with. You don't get to be in the middle of the Amazon forest, for example, where you've got all the lumber you could possibly want. You're material restricted, not people knowledge or passionate restricted. That's still there, and that's what you'll need to work with.
I've also had a chance to work both with urban poor communities and rural villages, and I would agree with Mark that they're not very much different. But what's important is you go to an organized community, or if there are none at the moment, get them to organize themselves, because yeah, it's difficult to talk to 1,000 people at the same time. So get them to talk about it first and organize themselves, and then you talk to them. I normally partner with and right now for my more recent projects, I partner with experts in community development and community organizing, because I think that's a requisite before we're able to bring a systemic solution to um, their problems. They have to be systematically, they have to be organized first.
Interesting. Thank you, sir. So for the last 5 minutes of our extended Q&A forum, we'll focus on questions regarding EWB and electronic certificate. So the first one is how to become a member of EWB. This goes for the professionals and the student chapters. So anyone want to take that?
Yes, I think I would answer that. So I'm part of the core team of EWB-Philippines. So actually it was incorporated last year. So right now with the core team members, we are still drafting the guidelines for the formation of EWB student chapters and professional chapters. So right now we have the EWB Davao for Davao Professionals chapter, and we have the EWB UP Diliman students chapter, and we are going to establish the EWB Metro Manila Professionals chapter. So right now, you can visit EWB-PH.org, and there's a join link. So as early as now, you can volunteer. So as early as now, you can volunteer. You can sign up, and if you have a group of maybe 15 students or 15 professionals in your area, you can create a chapter. So you can coordinate with us, and we will help you establish the guidelines and the process for establishing for doing an EWB project. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Eman. And I suppose for those also that are international participants, so how can they get in touch with their own chapters?
Mm-hmm. You can visit EWB-International.com. So there's a list of all the EWB chapters all over the world, and there's they have a link to the websites of these chapters, and then they can contact the local chapters in their areas.
Okay, so lastly, how will they get their e-certificate, and yeah, what are the operations they need to do?
For the e-certificate, so after I end this webinar, you will be directed to a feedback form. So just answer that feedback form. How did we do about this webinar? If you have any future topics that you want to discuss, and then after sending that, we'll send you an e-certificate within the week.
Okay, so thank you for that. So that is all the time we have, but I can see that there are a lot of very specific questions in our roster. So for those who just got in, the copy of the presentations of the resources are in the link that I'm about to send you, as well as the contact list for our speakers. Again, that's Sir Harold and Sir Mark, and their email addresses are here. Okay, so I sent it there, and it's also at the short link. Okay, so before we move on to the closing remarks,
maybe we can ask from the panelists, do you see any questions from the Q&A box that you still want to answer?
That you want to address?
We still have maybe 5 more minutes before I will wrap up this webinar.
I'd like to tell people that I encourage you to reach out I don't mind answering questions. It may take me a few days to get to it, but help yourself with emailing your questions to me. For those of you that were asking about how do you get started on or solving problems with water, sanitation, and hygiene and get funding for it, don't forget that we've had some pretty good success with going in without any funding whatsoever, except for the funding that it takes us to get there. When we walk into a village, we have nothing with this. So go from a standpoint to where you might not need a whole lot of stuff to get things fixed. See what you can do with what they've got. For example, you can there's 4 ways to clean water, and you can use trash to do it. An old plastic bottle, use sunlight. Don't drink it for 3 days. There's all kinds of things that can happen that are super inexpensive. So don't let costs necessarily stop you from going after a solution.
I'd like to comment on the question about how do we ensure that the people will take responsibility of the project when we leave. And I'd like to emphasize that the project isn't just about building an infrastructure and leaving. It's also about putting up systems, getting the people to talk about how they will manage it when you leave, and talking about ensuring that these systems will be sustainable even without us there. So the true measure of the success of the project is not building something in there, but ensuring that they'll be able to actually use it for a long time with them only in the communities.
I'd like to take one on, and that is, what do you do about the sustainability? How often do you go back and things like that? What we do is that local NGO that we were talking about, get them involved early. One of the things that we ask them to do up front before we get started is, are they going to be available to go back to the village to follow up? Now, in our case, we actually pay them to do that because it's very expensive for them to go to Iquitos all the way to the village. It takes days to get there. So we send them money through Western Union, small amount, I mean, $100 or whatever, and they'll go and they'll follow up and they'll chew out the villagers if they're not doing what's supposed to be done. Like, why isn't this working? What's going on here? So we've had incidences where people will fall back and maybe not use something that we've built 100%. They may drop back to only half of them. Well, that person's responsibility is go stir up the fire and get them back on board. And it's always been successful. It's about 2 months after after project completion, construction completion. It's about 3 months after that, 3 months after that. Just kind of go with the flow 4 times. And then we show up a year later. And we're usually there off and on through a 2-week period because we're usually doing another project while we're there. So that's when EWB shows up again. Use that NGO, make sure they have the aptitude and the willingness to follow up, especially if you pay for their basic costs.
I'd like to throw in a comment about the questions around funding. Our chapter's been in existence since about 2000, so about 20 years. And it probably took us about 10 years to get to the point where we had sufficient funds in the bank that we had reserved as unrestricted funds that we could start allocating money to new projects. So for the first 10 years of our existence, all of our projects started out with 0 funding. All they had was a desire to help a community that had asked for assistance.
Okay. Martel, do you have any?
I'll take the one on where it says, how do you choose a location? There is no problem finding a location. Once you get involved with the EWB, start your chapter, you're going to have a plethora of access to different things that the EWB already has of people that want help. So you're not going to have any problem finding a location. You may have an issue. You need to keep your mind open because you may get there and it's not that village that needs the help. It's another one next to it, for example. Keep your mind open about the location. Your local NGO will a partner will help you make that decision.
Okay, so I think that sums up our open forum. So before we end this seminar, I would like to do some wrap up. So some key takeaways from this webinar. So just correct me if if I'm wrong. So first, from the topic of Dr. Harold, that is, what does it mean to be an engineer without borders in the developing world? So he discussed a lot, some of the borders that we have to cross. The first one is to cross the walls of the classroom. So you have to go out, don't just learn from the books, and then learning, because in fact, in the hierarchy of learning, actual practice contributes more people learning than the typical academic. There's the second word is this one's also been highlighted, to transcend our preconceived notions of an engineer. So there are more pressing problems in the world. So remember that as engineers, we can do something about it. Third is, the third word is we have to cross the border of our comfort zones. So taking these global challenges may not be as comfortable sitting in an office from readable 5, this may not be as comfortable sitting in the office. So you just have to do the project, know from experience. And he also posed a challenge for you, for all the professional engineers, the engineering students, to step up and be part of the movement towards the sustainable development goals. And we should not let the borders that have been discussed to hinder us from losing the engineering skills that will benefit the humanity and the environment. And so he also promoted engineers without borders. So because we from EWB, we want our engineers to be global engineers, taking on global challenges, and we can start with what you see, with what we see every day right in front of us. So here in the Philippines, we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of global issues that we can start. And from Mark's presentation, the presentation is focused not on the technical side, but more on the people side of the project. So he started with the definition of sustainability, that it's relating to or being a method of harvesting resources and doing it so that you don't deplete or permanently damage them, building and creating something useful that will enhance the existence of everything around you and encourages life. And for if you want to have some sustainable process, you have to go through it, every step by step. And you must first is for the community, you have to develop trust. I think that's very, very important. And you must listen to what you must listen to their needs, tell them what they and understand, no matter what culture you're in. And I think take some time for yourself and not do anything. Smell it, observe. So look around, what's going on around you. And there's also don't fall in love with the first solution, especially theirs or yours. So go out and then check all the options available. And a key to creating a sustainable project is to create long-term behavioral change. So make sure that the community would contribute to the project, so that it will take some impact for the long term. Make sure that you've got a way to communicate with the people, and keep your mind open to the people issues more than just the nuts and bolts and nails issues. I think that's one's very impacting. And I think that's it. So anything to add from the key takeaways that I presented? Okay. So again, thank you very much to our panelists, Dr. Giselle Harold Aquino, to Mark Illian, and thank you again from our advisor, Ms. Agnes Wark, and Mr. Cherry Applegate, and then Martel for doing the open forum. So if you have any questions, the email addresses of the speakers are there at the chat. If you have any questions about EWB-Philippines, if you want to be part of the movement, if you want to create your own chapters in your universities, schools, colleges, or your areas for the professionals, you can message me at eman@ewb-ph.org. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and we plan to make this monthly. So we'll update you on our next topic next month. Thank you very much.
Be safe, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.